Hi guys, this is Vidas.
And Osha.
Let's start episode 167 of Ask Vidas and Osha podcast. This question was sent by David, and he writes, Today I had to play O Worship the King for service. I wanted to make it a little more exciting, so instead of playing just the last part of the hymn as an introduction, I improvised a short modulating fanfare with trumpet and shamad on the swell. Then on the grate with a rather full-sounding registration continued with the second half of the hymn, only slightly reharmonized, followed by a one-beat rest to let the congregation know it's time to join in. It was very well received. And it was fun to play, but I wonder if you have any suggestions for beginner or intermediate organists for both hymn introductions and alternative harmonizations. I think some time ago either you or Oshra indicated that one has to be careful with alternative harmonizations and that are not a good idea on the last stanza as a general rule, but in our congregation they seem to work well and add interest, and the people seem to sing all the more enthusiastically. Perhaps you have a suggestion or a formula for improvising hymn introductions, or could recommend a publication with somewhat simple introductions. Anything you can suggest would be wonderful. Thank you. Osha, this is a question that is probably bothering a lot of church organists.
Sure, because it's a big part of their job.
To introduce the hymn. What's the most common introduction? Probably to play entire stanza in 4 parts for congregation.
Well, or just the last 8, or sometimes even 4 measures.
The last phrase or 2.
Yes.
Or the first phrase and the last phrase.
That's true.
Is this a boring way to introduce a hymn?
Well, not necessarily. It's sort of a traditional way.
Do you think that David should do this or anything else you could add?
Well, you can do it for some hymns, and then for other hymns you may play an elaborate introduction.
If you were invited to play in David's church, what would you do?
Well, now when I know that his church, his congregation loves elaborated preludes, maybe I would play some fancy introduction too.
Would you play with ornamented chorale in the right hand version?
Yes, could be.
Or in the left hand, the tenor line?
Maybe I would do it in the right hand, it would be easier.
What about in the pedals with augmentation, with posaune?
Well, yes, but I wouldn't play introduction with posaune. I think it would be too crushing. Too loud, probably. What would you do?
I think any example that we can find from Bach's Orgelbüchlein would work well here. Except in those days the hymns were played rather slowly, and as if you notice the texture of the chorale prelude and the rhythm of that tune is basically twice as low, so which means probably that entire piece would last a minute or two here, and that's usually in modern terms too long.
Yes, for example, I myself don't like long introductions to the hymns. I mean, it's okay to play, to do fancy postlude, for example, but if you will, do long introduction for each hymn, I believe the service might become longer and longer.
So if you take, for example, the first phrase and the last phrase, but treat it as a chorale prelude based on the model from Orgelbüchlein, would that be sophisticated and creative enough?
I think so, yes.
And not too long.
Yes. Plus, in America there are so many publishers that publish church music, and you can find actual introductions to various hymns. Although you have to check and to be careful that you play your introduction and then a hymn in the same key, because there might be different keys in those.
And then they have alternative harmonizations for the last stanza.
Sure. Yes.
Usually, would you play the last stanza somewhat differently?
Well, it's again depends on the hymn itself, because not for each hymn it's an appropriate way to do it.
Mm-hmm.
Especially, for example, if you are playing in Catholic Church and you are playing, let's say, during Lent, I wouldn't do it. But if it's Easter Sunday, then yes, okay, why not?
Mm-hmm. And you can even transpose your harmonization, half a step or entire whole tone higher.
Would be like in a pop music, yes?
Exactly.
Yes. Would give you more excitement.
Would you then choose to play modulating interlude between those two stanzas?
No, I wouldn't do that.
Why?
I'm afraid I would be kicked out of the church as Bach was.
What's wrong with that? You look at Bach, what he achieved later.
Well, but at that time he lost his job.
That's okay, he found another. If you did that consistently, the basically voice about you would spread around the mountains across the globe that you are one and only. I think.
Yes. I think, sometimes it's a problem that, organist wants to demonstrate his or her ability above everything else. But, while playing in church and especially doing hymns, because we always have text, and I think the texts in hymns are the most important part. So, and I mean that your accompaniment should never, sort of cover the text. That's my opinion.
Yeah, you should probably choose the texture and registration based on the text printing.
I know, yes, and you can, register him accordingly.
That's obviously for another topic of discussion, registrations, right? It's not things that David is asking, but yeah, he could probably use some alternative harmonizations and make introductions and sometimes even modulating fanfares, right? It's nothing against the rules, right? If it's a solemn occasion,
yes.
if it's a festivity like Christmas or Easter or Pentecost. I think one of the easier ways to introduce a hymn is to start with a single voice, let's say soprano. Then after the first phrase you add the alto, so then two-part texture. After the second phrase you add the tenor, then the three-part texture. And for the last phrase all four parts come in.
That's a nice way to introduce him.
Gradually making it more sophisticated, more thicker texture and a little bit louder, right? That's if the hymn has four phrases.
Yes.
What about if the hymn has six phrases, Osha? You should add six voices then?
No.
Why not?
Would you like to do that?
Yes, double pedal, I love it.
Well, it would be very hard. Go ahead and do it.
I did actually. It didn't work. So I stopped doing it.
So I would rather stick with 4 voices for hymns.
Or even 2 voices. What's wrong with 2 voice introductions? You could have a bicinium, right, for entire stanza, or even the first phrase and the last phrase, very thin texture, soprano and the bass playing basically outer voices of the hymn, maybe a little bit with embellishment in the right hand or the left hand or in alternation. Would that work?
I think it would work just fine. And because you have to play in church each Sunday and do a few hymns, so well, you can use all these methods and see what is working for you.
And don't forget the trio texture, of course, where you play 3 parts and you can place your hymn tune in any of the parts, soprano, tenor, or the bass.
That's right.
Excellent. So, guys, we hope this was useful to you. Please send us more of your questions. We love helping you grow. This was Vidas.
And Ausra,
And remember, when you practice,
miracles happen.